We all know that when there's event-driven fundraising, golf outings and galas and that whole family of fundraising types of activities produce a lot of fatigue. Fatigue with the donors. After an event, you have to leave them alone for a while. The volunteers, same thing, leave me alone for a while. Staff gets burned out, and even the leadership team can be tired of one event after another. Basically, when we save $20, $30, $50, $100,000, it's the same as having raised it, only better yet because it's a recurring savings, and so you don't have to hold an event to produce the $50,000. We've already lowered the cost structure by $50,000. It's the same as holding a golf outing every year without actually holding a golf outing. Everybody that we've ever worked with will echo the fact that we find savings and organization keeps that. It supplements their fundraising. And if we don't, we pat them on the back, tell them to keep up a great work, give them a nice letter, and there's no fees. So there is no downside to this, and it's exactly what we're saying, and any number of our references will say the exact same thing despite their initial skepticism. So an endowment, of course, is when a donor makes a large gift to an organization and allows that nonprofit to use the interest that that endowment is producing in its programs. So when we save an organization, let's say $40,000, then the endowment equivalent of that is probably 25 times, let's call it $1 million worth of endowment funds it would take to produce that $40,000. And therefore, it's like getting $1 million endowment check because the benefits of that, the $40,000 a year, is year after year. And so it's a big deal to save $40,000 or 10 or 20 or any number. And we identify a handful of areas that they might be curious about potential savings. They don't have to be areas where they're feeling pain, but they're open to a free assessment to determine whether, if in fact, maybe there's some savings there to explore. And this is done at no cost to the organization. There's no risk. They don't have to implement the ideas. There's no fee. Eventually, if savings are implemented, then we participate in those savings. That's the only way we're paid. So we consider ourselves resultants rather than consultants, because consultants are paid for words and advice, and the creative is only paid for participating in actual savings that we generate. The CEO really needs to set the stage for this, because we're not trying to make anybody look bad. We're just trying to find savings for an organization so they don't have to raise as much. Or it'll help their fundraising efforts because they've saved money. It's up to the CEO to comfort the finance folks that A, this is not going to require much work on their part, if any, frankly, and they are not going to be made to look bad. In fact, they're a hero just for helping coordinate and cooperate with this very low time investment to find potential savings in their organization. And you know, sometimes we don't find savings, and that's not a bad thing either. If you can tell your board of directors that you brought in third-party experts and they looked at a number of different things and we were doing a great job and there was no cost to that exercise, that's not a bad thing either. So there's really only two outcomes in this process, and they're both positive. One of them is that we find no savings, pat everybody on the back, and there's no cost. The other one is that we find a bunch of savings and it's money that they don't have to raise, or it supplements the work that they're already doing. So, you know, whenever I in the past would engage consultants in my CFO life, I knew that it was a gamble, that I was betting that whatever advice, ideas I might get from that consultant, I would have to then turn around with our organization and turn that into an ROI as a no-brainer, because there are no upfront fees. There's no retainer, there's no hourly rate, we don't get paid for reports or words or advice. The only way any money changes hands is if actual cash savings are realized. And we don't get anything until that happens, if it happens, and after that happens. And we also let the organization calculate the savings, so there's no suspicion about how the savings were calculated. And then we review their calculations and say, well, that looks good. And they say, great, send us a bill for your small share of the savings. And it just seems to work when you work that way rather than charging fees and then the client has to hope for a good outcome.